Hello and welcome back. Now, if you're a long-time follower of my channel, first of all, thank you very much. Second of all, I'm truly sorry. And third of all, you'll probably be familiar with my series Justice for Jean Alesi, where I'm playing through the Formula 1 game of the 1995 season to try and see if I can win Jean Alesi a World Championship. But why Jean Alesi? Why is he so special when his race record kind of suggests otherwise? Well, I've put together this video to kind of explain. Now, full disclosure, if you've watched round 1 and round 2 of Justice for Jean Alesi, you'll have seen large parts of this video. I basically included some documentary sections in with those rounds of the championship. But since not everyone who enjoys historical F1 content also likes, retro gameplay, I've decided to snip it out, add some bits in, and essentially make a little mini Jean Alesi documentary about the early part of his career. So sit back, relax, and enjoy the rise of Jean Alesi. My name's Ash, this is The Outside Line. Jean Alesi arrived in Formula 1 halfway through the 1989 season as a former French Formula 3 champion, try saying that when you're drunk, and was partway through his second season in Formula 3000. Due to a sponsorship clash between driver Michele Alboreto and the Tyrrell Racing team, each were backed by different cigarette brands, welcome to the 80s, a seat had suddenly opened up. Alesi was racing for Eddie Jordan's F3000 team at the time, and Eddie Jordan struck a deal with Ken Tyrrell to get Alesi into that open seat for one race. Jordan even hyped up Alesi to Tyrrell, saying that he'd instantly be quicker than their best driver. The hard sell clearly worked as Jean Alesi made his F1 debut at round 7 of the championship at Paul Ricard, in a time before the track looked like an acid trip. Alesi would qualify 16th, but after staying clear of a first lap crash which saw the race red flagged, on lap 1 of the restart he would climb to 9th. He would subsequently run as high as 2nd until stopping for new tyres, and he would eventually finish 4th on his debut. As a result, Alesi would keep his F1 seat at Tyrrell for the rest of the season, but at a cost. Eddie Jordan was not about to let his star driver abandon him mid-season, so Jordan demanded Alesi complete the F3000 season and win if he wanted to keep racing in F1. Alesi obliged, winning the Formula 3000 Championship a race early, while continuing to impress in F1, scoring at 2 further rounds of the championship. 1990 marked Alesi's first full season in F1, staying with Tyrrell. He would start the season as the team's lead driver, and in round 1 of that year's championship, the US GP in Phoenix, he would announce his arrival as a future star. After qualifying 4th, he would get an incredible start and lead into turn 1, eventually opening out a lead over Ayrton Senna's McLaren. Despite Alesi running a Ford V8 engine considered vastly inferior to Senna's Honda V10, he led for just under half the race. And when Senna came to pass him at turn 1, he didn't go quietly, retaking the lead by positioning himself well for turn 2. Senna got the job done a lap later and went on to win, Alesi finishing 2nd. Alesi also grabbed 2nd at Monaco that year and performed well on the whole, finishing 9th in the championship in what was seen as a largely uncompetitive Tyrrell. At the end of the season, big teams, namely Williams and Ferrari, came calling. This would be a career-defining moment for Alesi. Now, the short and slightly romanticised version of this story I've read in several places is that Alesi went with his heart over his head in choosing Ferrari, but I think this actually does a disservice to Alesi considering what it resulted in. What actually happened is Williams got in there first, initially speaking to Alesi in the winter of 1989. By early 1990, Alesi had signed a contract with Frank Williams' team. Job done, right? Not quite. That contract had a clause in it stating that Williams had an option on Alesi's services until September. In other words, Williams could still back out at any time before then. But Alesi was told not to worry and that he would be announced at the 1990 French Grand Prix. Guess what? He wasn't. At this point, Alesi got worried and spoke to former Williams driver Nelson Piquet for advice. With Ferrari interested, Piquet told Alesi that if Williams didn't announce him after the British Grand Prix, he should look at a deal with Maranello. Piquet even made some amendments to Alesi's contract demands, adding more money, a Ferrari F40, and for them to cover the buyout costs from Williams and Tyrrell. Alesi was hesitant, thinking he'd get laughed out of Ferrari with these demands, but Piquet insisted it was the right thing to do. So when Williams didn't announce, Alesi took his new contract to Ferrari. The Ferrari president's reaction? For a younger driver? You know what to put. And that was that. Williams' hesitation meant Alesi would join Ferrari. To this day, it's still not entirely clear why Williams didn't make the deal with Alesi. Frank Williams once told Alesi it was down to convincing their engine supplier Renault to accept the move. Another story is that Williams were really after Ayrton Senna. Then, when Nigel Mansell announced he was going to retire at Silverstone that year, that prompted Williams to try and re-sign him, which they eventually did. Whatever the reason, Alesi would drive for Ferrari from 1991 until 1995. In that time, Williams would win 2 Drivers' Championships and 3 consecutive Constructors' Championships, while Ferrari would not. Despite mounting a challenge with Prost the year before Alesi joined, they would subsequently produce a run of cars that either struggled with reliability, performance, or both. The Ferrari I'm driving in my Justice for Jean Alesi series, the 1995 412 T2, would probably be the best Ferrari Alesi drove, and represented the start of an upward swing for the team. But at the end of the 95 season, Alesi would be replaced by Michael Schumacher, and we all know what happened after that. Now don't get me wrong, I'm not saying in a Williams he'd have been a guaranteed world champion, especially with teammates like Mansell, Prost and Hill. In fact, the one season he drove alongside Prost at Ferrari, he lost to him by 13 points in the championship. But what I am saying is I think we can be fairly certain that in a Williams, Alesi would have more than one race win to his name. But while it's up for debate what could have and should have been of Alesi's time in F1, what isn't up for debate is his ability to drive in the wet. Maybe it's no surprise then that his earliest experiences of motorsport centred around rally driving, taking part in amateur rallying and hill climb events, before eventually taking up karting at age 16 and focusing on circuit racing from there. But clearly those early experiences of car control on changeable surfaces stayed with him. Alesi has spoken about how he liked the rear of the car to feel a little loose, his style earning him comparisons with another famous driver who drove the number 27 Ferrari, Gilles Villeneuve. So here are Jean Alesi's top 3 best wet weather drives. Alesi's finish at the Spanish Grand Prix would be his and the team's joint best result of the season. The F92A was not one of the classic Ferraris, to say the least. After qualifying 8th, the race got underway on a damp track, and Alesi would get an amazing start, making it to 3rd by the first corner. Okay, full disclosure, I've rewatched the start of this race several times and it actually looks like Alesi and quite a few others on the grid slightly jumped the start. Just before the lights go green, one of the support vehicles at the back flashes its lights twice, and I wonder if this just triggers some of them to go early. Not sure, but anyway, Alesi gets away like a rocket, nobody's penalised, and as a result, I'm classing it as a legit start, perfectly legal, FIA confirmed, suck it. On lap 7, another rainmaster in the form of Michael Schumacher overtook Alesi, with Gerhard Berger in the McLaren trying to do the same shortly after, only for Alesi to retake the place. However, Berger tried again, this time tipping Alesi round, dropping him to 6th. At around the halfway point of the race, with the rain now in full flow and the track incredibly wet, Alesi came in for fresh tyres and immediately started his charge up the field. He cruised past Berger and took 14 seconds out of the gap to Senna in just 2 laps. When Senna spun out, Alesi inherited 3rd and would finish just 2 seconds behind Schumacher. Now that's a recovery drive. The European Grand Prix at the Nürburgring was almost Alesi's second career win, if it wasn't for a certain Michael Schumacher. Starting from 6th on another damp track, Alesi started on dry tyres and with increased downforce, and mastered the patchy conditions to get himself up to 4th. When the leaders stopped to pit, Alesi carried on and opened out a lead that at one point reached 45 seconds. On lap 34, the top 2, Alesi and Schumacher, would pit. The key difference was Alesi was supposed to go to the end, while Schumacher would stop again. So Alesi had to manage his tyres and fuel, but Schumacher could push, and the track was drying out. In the end, Schumacher would catch and pass Alesi 2 laps from the end, and win the race by 2.6 seconds. It's notable that Alesi lost a lot of time to uncooperative back markers, in one instance losing 5 seconds after having to take to the grass at the Vidal chicane. That said, it was also a stellar charge from Schumacher that would bring him to the brink of his second title. Okay, I know what you're thinking, I should probably be mentioning his win, right? Well, yes, it was a damp track to begin with, but it was mostly dry, and I also want to talk about that separately. So actually I'm going to cover this as probably Alesi's most famous wet weather drive. After qualifying second, it was another damp track at the start of the race from morning rain, damp enough that everyone would start the race on wet tyres. Alesi would get penalised for a jump start and serve a 10-second stop-go penalty on lap 3, and he would then return to the pits on lap 7 for slick tyres, as the track was drying. Note, drying, certainly not dry. Nonetheless, he was instantly 5 seconds faster than the rest of the field, and despite spinning while trying to overtake Pedro Lamy, kinda looked like Lamy didn't see Alesi on the outside and accidentally run him out of road, Alesi still made it from 15th to 2nd by lap 10, and he was closing in on Schumacher at the front. However, we were denied a fight for the lead when Alesi's drive shaft failed on lap 25. Despite retiring early, Alesi has cited Suzuka 95 as one of his favourite memories from his time in F1. Now it's interesting that in all three of those wet weather stories where Alesi drove well, Schumacher drove better. In all those examples, I think it's fair to say that Schumacher's Benetton was better than Alesi's Ferrari, but is it just indicative of their respective levels? Did Alesi really reach his potential, or did his machinery let him down? For me, in a different car with a different team, Jean Alesi's win record would be much more befitting a man of his talents, and he'd at least have been in the picture for a world championship. Whether he'd win it, we'll never really know. But that's why I thought he was the perfect candidate to rewrite history with. And I'm not done there. The next time I talk about Jean Alesi, I'll be covering how his luck repeatedly failed him and the one time that it didn't.